Hey lovely teachers, welcome back to Vivid Practice. I'm Nicola Canton. Today we're looking at interleaved practice. So you might have heard this term floating around the atmosphere, or you may have never heard it before in your life. Either way, I'm here to explain it to you and talk about some of the benefits. So to understand interleaved practice, we have to first understand blocked practice. Then we can understand the difference. Blocked practice is where we practice one thing and then the next thing and then the next thing until we're done. For example, we practice the A major scale and then our sonatina and then our boogie in C and then we're finished if that's all that's on our practice list. Whereas interleaved practice is where we mix up the order of things and revisit things in a single practice session. So we might do the A major scale still first, but then we do some of the sonatina and then do the A major scale again in a different way. And then we go back to the sonatina and then we do the boogie and then we go back to the A major scale and back to the sonatina and back to the boogie. You see what I'm saying? So it's not in a specific pattern, although it could be. It works best, I think, when it's almost random and you're mixing up the order. So the key to making that work is that you do short chunks on each thing. And part of the magic of that is that you really have to focus on that specific issue, on one specific issue for that chunk of time. Because if you're going to practice for 30 minutes and you're going to do 3 things but mix up the order of them, you might only spend 3, 4, 5 minutes on each item before you move to the next item and then go back and forth and back and forth. So each one of those short chunks of time, you're going to have to do something specific. And I think that's what most great practice is. It's tackling one specific problem in each chunk of time or in each practice session even. The other magic of this is to do with the way our brains work. So I'm not a neuroscientist, but I'm going to explain this to you in a way that is very non-neuroscience-y, but helps me and my students to visualize what's going on. Okay? So this is how I explain it to the kiddos. I want you to think about your short-term memory as being right in your forehead, at the front of your head. Okay? And your long-term memory, which is like your storage unit where you're going to keep things for good, that's in the back at the base of your head where your head meets your spine. Okay. Your brain at the back of your head, your storage unit, can only hold so much stuff. And it needs to prioritize what it puts in there. But unfortunately, we don't have a method of communicating to it what it should put in the long-term storage unit. The only way it knows that it's going to need those things again and again, and it should put them in the storage unit so that it has them and they're safe, is if we keep trying to recall the same things. So when we practice something once and we practice this little section, do it with whatever technique we need to work on, right? We practice it. At the moment, it's sitting in our short-term memory at the front of our head. And then, as soon as we stop playing it, it gets on a train. Bear with me. This is how it makes sense to the kids. It gets on a train, and the train is going all the way to the back of our head, straight across. So it's not passing the storage unit that's down the bottom of our head at the back, okay? The train is going straight across the top of our head, from the front of our forehead, straight across and back. And it starts that journey, and because it's a train, it's slowly getting faster and faster and faster, right? So our job is to jump on that train and pull out the information and bring it back to the front of our head again and again and again before it exits out the back of our head. So the information is going to leave. If we're not quick enough, we're drawing it back to the front of our head. And if we do that enough times, our brain decides, oh, it was on the wrong route. It needs to go to the storage unit, and it sends it on the other route, which goes down to the back of our head at the bottom where the storage unit is. I don't always take so long to explain this, but I'm kind of giving you all the details of how I talk about this with kids so that you can visualize and use the story in your own way. You can make up your own little way of explaining this. But the point is, we have this stuff in our short-term memory. And because of the forgetting curve, as soon as we stop doing it and stop holding it there, it starts slowly disintegrating. But if we bring it back to our short-term memory again, it gets a little bit stronger and a little bit stronger and a little bit stronger until it becomes pretty durable, such that we can remember it for months or even years. That's our goal with interleaved practice, really. Because it doesn't count if we just do something a bunch of times in a row. That's only one trip in the short-term memory. Then it'll get on the train and it'll go shoot back out the back of the head and disappear forever until we have to relearn it again. A couple of times in a row is great. Put it in our short-term memory, make sure we got it right. Then we set it aside and let it get on the train so that we can grab it off the train, pull it back to the short-term memory, and do that again and again until it's strong enough to keep it for good. In my non-scientific way of explaining it, that's what we're trying to do with interleaved practice. Another way to look at it is that every time we have to recall information, it gets stronger. It gets brighter even, more vivid, right? So every time we have to recall something, it gets more vivid. Take this out of music, right? Let's say you were trying to learn French vocabulary. You have this word, you've just learned it. You need to give yourself time to forget it and then test yourself with the flashcard again. It doesn't work to just sit there for 10 minutes and flip the flashcard over and back and over and back and over and back. It's not actually increasing your memory of the word that much. It would increase it much more if every 10 minutes for 2 hours you checked your knowledge of that term again, right? That's really what we're doing with interleaved practice. So it's spacing out the repetitions, but it's spacing them out with other practice so that we can be really efficient and fit a lot of things in. So if you're curious about more of the real science behind interleaved practice, I highly suggest you look at Noah Kageyama's blog, which is The Bulletproof Musician, because he takes studies both in the music field and outside, like things in sport and different areas that we can then apply to music, and he looks at those, and he's talked about interleaved practice there before, and it's really fascinating to look at it from that more scientific lens. How do we apply this in our lessons? Because so far it's just been about this theory, right? And you might try it in your own practice, and I highly suggest you do. If you're using Vivid Practice, it's one of our practice modes, so you can use that to structure your own practice, to structure working during some lessons, to demonstrate it to students, and to encourage them to do it that way at home. You can also do this manually, so you can just force yourself. I would suggest some kind of timer though. That's why we built this into Vivid Practice, is because every increment, every 4 minutes, it sets off a little bell and tells you that you have to change assignments, because it does take a lot of discipline to implement this kind of practice technique. It's not that easy when you're in the flow of doing something to say, nope, cut that, now do something else that's hard. Cut that and come back to this thing, which now feels so much harder. We're working so much harder at it because we've taken a break from it. That's why it's good, because the harder we're working, the more we're retaining that knowledge. But it doesn't feel super attractive in the moment, and it feels counterproductive. When you do this yourself, if you've never tried it before, you will see it feels like I'm not learning anything. I'm not getting anywhere, right? But actually, you're getting further. If you look at the progress made the next day rather than in that moment, you'll see it's a lot more for interleaved practice versus block practice. So using the Vivid Practice app can help, or using a timer or something like that to force you to change things. And I want to encourage you to think about doing this in your lessons more than thinking about recommending it to students. Because we put it in the Vivid Practice app because I want students to do it at home, and I wanted to make that easier. But as with everything, if we don't walk the walk, if we don't do it in lessons, there's very little chance of it happening at home. You'll get the odd go-getter student that will go and do it themselves and just believe you because you told them that it was a great idea and that science was behind it. But they need to experience it. Most of them need to experience it first. So try working your lessons this way. You might find it really difficult, but that's kind of the point, is to empathize with the fact that this is difficult to do. That doesn't mean it's not valid. And one more little note before we wrap up on interleaved practice. I want to encourage you that this doesn't have to be all or nothing. When I talk about interleaved practice strategies, and I've given presentations on this, a lot of teachers jump to thinking, all practice should look like this because it's the most efficient. And that's not at all what I mean. Sometimes we shouldn't do the most efficient option. Some students won't be suited to this. Students with ADHD, for example, and some other diagnoses may find this just impossible and very stressful and unnecessary. Absolutely it is. Because if your ability to switch tasks is less than most people, this is not a good idea because you're just wasting tons of time on that task switching, right? So it's not for everyone, and it shouldn't be all the time. It's not all or nothing, but it is a useful structure to bring into your practice toolkit and to bring into your lessons so that you know how to make things as efficient as possible and your students can make better progress. I hope you enjoy giving Interleaved practice a go yourself first. Make sure you do it yourself first, and then trying it out in lessons with your students.